Long ago, to counter the dark forces and evil creatures from hell, angels created monsters of their own. Werewolves were always depicted to be demonic creatures, vile and ruthless mindless beasts controlled like puppets. However, neither heaven nor hell would have predicted their kingdoms to be destroyed by their very own. No one would have guessed the first werewolf would change the world they presumed to have power over. No one would have known this cursed being would turn out to be the strongest werewolf in all of existence. This is his story. This is the Legend of Belru. Chapter 1. The Hallowmanes of Edlemere. From the woodland region of Edlemere, a deep, rolling, rumbling echo travels in the night. Hooves stomping on the ground in succession, galloping with purpose. But the strong winds refused to carry the neighs of those who galloped, for they were not exactly horses, rather the Hallowmanes. These horse monsters have long occupied the woods of Edlemere. Frightening creatures that looked like horses ran like them but never acted as such. They were huge, able to walk and talk like a human. For speed, they would gallop and run on all fours, but in battle, they would stand tall on their hind legs and fight like warriors. For a while, the Hallowmanes from Edlemere were free spirits, walking the path they created. But now they worked for angels for a specific cause. They were tasked to find the angel tablet. From cities and towns, these creatures galloped their way into the village of Belru, a combination of stone cottages and timber houses with roofs from either tiles or thatch. This land had a windy river to the east, providing farmers with a sustainable source of water. Animals grazed on the fields around the village, while the barns sheltered the rest. Belru was clean, cozy, and comfortable for any stranger or resident. They were hard-working folk, waking up at the crack of dawn with the roosters crow and sleeping early before the moon moved over their village. Woken from their sleep, they walked out their homes and gathered in the center of the village path made from soil and gravel. They held lanterns out in front, rubbing their eyes to see clearly, then asked the Hallowmanes, "What can we do for you?" The horse monsters drew their bows and pointed arrows at the people while circling them, either to show dominance or intimidation. The children standing in the crowd behind the elderly were petrified as ever. Then the Hallowmanes spoke. Their voices were deep and muffled.
"We are looking for the angel tablet. We know it's somewhere nearby. We believe the one holding it is responsible for the murder of 5 angels in the past few months."
Shortly after a moment of silence, a voice had echoed from the village bench, east of the crowd and the Hallowmanes. "You shouldn't bully people, you know." The Hallowmanes looked towards the voice and saw the moonlight shining onto a monstrous figure sitting on a village bench. This monster was brown like the very soil they walked on. Its fur blew in the strong wind, and in its hand was a red apple. Belru remained seated on the bench, throwing the apple in the air and then catching it. The werewolf took a bite from it and began talking.
"These folk have no dealings with the angel tablet. No human on this land has the angel tablet." "Then you do. Come with us willingly, Belru, or else."
"Or else what?"
"Why don't you try taking it from me?"
The village was filled with an eerie silence. Belru remained seated, but his demeanor changed. His eyes were menacing and focused. The smile he had before diminished and changed into a frown. The horse monster's gazes were fixed on the werewolf, completely oblivious to the fact that most of the village folk had weapons in their hand ready to fight. Belru was not occupied by helpless villagers, not when they knew how foul and evil the games being played with them by angels and demons were. Then, just before one of the 7 horse monsters could release their bowstring, Belru seemingly dashed forward, moving like a shadow of water, and grabbed the arrowhead. He was careful to stand away from the crowd to avoid stray arrows striking the villagers. The fight lasted for 19 seconds. The Hallowmanes released their arrows, missing their target completely. Belru's fluid movement made it difficult to see him, let alone strike him. Despite their rock-solid chest made of muscle and tight skin, Belru clawed his way, ripping chunks of flesh from their body. Some pivoted on their hind legs and struck with their front hooves, which Belru caught and tossed them aside with minimal effort. The children looked away from what was going on as Belru taught them, and just before they turned around, no Hallowmane remained standing. Thankfully, the shadows never showed the youth what transpired. It hid the blood, flesh, and torn-out heads of the Hallowmanes lying on the ground. The puddles of blood spread out contained teeth and dismembered limbs of the humanoid horse-like creatures as well. Belru told the elderly to make their way inside their homes. He had a warm smile on his face and his demeanor changed back to a gentle giant. He told them that he would clean up the mess and there was nothing to worry about. Indeed, with the village of Velmora having an 8-foot-tall absolute unit of a special class werewolf, what was there to fear? However, Belru knew the Hallowmanes invading the village wasn't by accident. The angels were getting desperate, and he needed to find a way to protect these villagers while completing the remaining 5 murders quickly. They never knew Belru's past, nor did they want to. One day he washed up on the riverbank, battered and bruised, left for dead. The village elder never asked questions and took the beast in. As frightening and monstrous as Belru was, they treated his wounds and gave him a home. His aura radiated a warm, innocent soul trapped within, an aura that could be seen beyond the fur and sharp teeth. Months passed and Belru became one of their own, working in the village, visiting markets, living a normal life despite being a monster. The village folk took a while to get used to a talking werewolf, especially one that gigantic, but they warmed up to him eventually. Belru has defended the village of Velmora from all sorts of creatures, big, small, powerful, and menacing. But he knew these creatures weren't being sent by hell or the demons. How could they be, when he was the one that closed the gates of hell? Once he cleaned up the bodies of the horse monsters, at least what was left of them, he washed up and donned his village clothes. He made his way back to his favorite bench, sat down and stared into oblivion, deep in thought. It's been months since he closed the portal to hell and 125 years of being a special class werewolf. Then he removed a stone tablet and rubbed his furry fingers over it. 5 angel names were scratched out previously using his claw while 5 remain. Gently, he kept the stone tablet to the side. The werewolf could feel something or someone of great power approaching. Belru, whistling the entire time, sharpened the villagers' daggers while they slept, making sure their weapons and armor suited them well in a self-defense situation. Though, behind him within a split second, he felt immense pressure almost suffocating him. He felt power way beyond an angel or a demon. His instincts took over his thoughts as he grabbed one of the daggers and threw it behind him with all his might, without looking. The dagger was caught mid-air by the glistening steel blade. Belru turned back to see who or what stood behind him. There was a tall, slender figure wearing a dark black hooded cloak with a skeleton-like face. Glowing red eyes peeked through the dark hollow eye sockets that looked more like the abyss than darkness. And then he glanced at the scythe, deflecting the moonlight. The Grim Reaper reached inside his cloak as Belru tensed up, ready to attack. Death pulled out a cigar, snapped his fingers, which created a flame to light it. Then he said, "Belru Caesar, it's an honor to finally meet you.
Have you come to take my soul?"
This entire time, Belru remained seated. Death observed this as well, then walked towards the bench and sat next to the werewolf. "No," the Reaper said. Belru looked at him and asked,
"Did the angel send you?"
Belru continued sharpening the daggers. Death found this rather fascinating. The highest of demons and archangels fear the mere name of the Grim Reaper, yet Belru couldn't be bothered. "No, lad, no one orders me around, but I would love to know what's your story. You've created quite an uproar in the supernatural world.
Why?
Well, for starters, let's go through the killing, shall we? First angel, throat slit. Second angel, you fought in the jungle named after you. You scared away the cannibals, which is really a big deal considering no one can enter that place after you cursed it. You broke the angel's hands and legs, tied him to the tree, and let the ants and termites have him. Third angel, you ripped out her wings and choked her with it.
Belru continued whistling, sharpening the daggers as if the Reaper wasn't next to him.
Fourth angel smashed their head onto the ground until there was nothing left to smash. And the fifth angel, you dismembered their limbs, wrapped up in their wings, and sent it to Jorah as a package. Now, if that's what you did to the angels, don't get me started about what you did to the demons in hell before closing the gates. So, I want to know how and why I am sitting next to a werewolf that's just as strong as I am.
Finally, the whistling stopped. Belru gradually woke up from the bench. He turned his head towards the Grim Reaper and gave a warm smile, showing the same kindness that he had for the villagers of Velmora. "Please leave my home," he said, "unless you would like to buy the villagers' paintings of freshest crops. You have no dealings here, Grim." Death was annoyed. He tilted his head to the side, loosening the crick in his neck.
Listen, pal, I collect souls, and I am 5 angel souls short of my collection. I care not about the stupid angel tablet. Do not mistake me for the Hallowmanes. I take what I want.
Belru had been walking away from the Reaper. Then he looked behind him and said, "Once again, if you will not buy any paintings of the freshest crops in the land, I suggest you leave my home. I will not ask again." The Grim Reaper sighed. "Screw this," he said. He swung his scythe with all his might and struck Belru dead center of his chest. The werewolf flew to the next village known as Wolfenden, south of Velmora. This land told tales of beasts living among humans, but was now vacant and supposedly haunted. The Grim Reaper turned into a wisp of dark smoke and let the strong wind of the night carry him to Wolfenden. The full moon had seemingly been covered by dark clouds bursting with rain. Thunder rumbled in the sky and the night felt more ominous than before. When the Grim reached the village, he saw a house destroyed and a puff of dust obstructing the rubble. Belru walked through the debris and dusted off his fur. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't in pain. Facing off against death himself, this was the calmest the werewolf had ever been. Both of them stood on either side of Wolfenden, while similar thoughts racing and echoing through their mind.
Well, shit. This guy is strong. I can't hold back.
Finally a worthy opponent. I don't need to hold back anymore. And so, with a flash of lightning followed by a thundercrack, both of them dashed towards each other. Their punches, kicks, elbows, and throws packed so much of force it created sound waves in the village. At the start, Belru was having trouble with the scythe. The weapon wielded by the Reaper was the most dangerous he had ever faced thus far. The werewolf tricked the Grim, aiming high but landing a powerful right hook to the body. The Reaper watched his bones shattering and flying in the air, then noticed the hole in his torso. In that moment, Dad could not help but formulate in his thoughts, "This guy is stronger than famine and war by a mile." However, the scythe still served a problem. It cut Belru, leaving deep gashes on the werewolf's body. And still, he remained calm. His breathing remained unchanged, and then he found a way to get rid of the weapon. The Reaper created distance and reached out his hand. A stream of fire shot out his palm like a flamethrower, heading towards the werewolf. Belru Caesar widened his eyes and bent his arm at the elbow joint, touching his fist to his forehead, creating a glowing orb-like shield. The fire never penetrated the force field as Belru pushed forward towards the Reaper. The werewolf opened up himself to an attack from the Grim. It was bait, but in the heat of battle, one sees an opening and one takes it.
The groom spun his scythe with one arm and then impaled the werewolf in his stomach. Belru winced in pain looking at his stomach while one hand grabbed the scythe handle. He lifted his head up and began laughing. His eyes were the same color as the blood dripping from his mouth. One thought ran through the Grim Reaper's mind. What is this beast made of? Belru pushed the scythe deeper into his stomach right until the blade pushed through his back. The Reaper was now standing face to chest with the werewolf, and then the fight took a turn. Belru Caesar, the legendary werewolf, was never good at distance. Orbs and beams being thrown at him, long weapons like spears, staffs, or scythes were always a detriment. But when he found a way to get closer to you, to grab onto you, it was game over. The werewolf pummeled the Reaper so bad, pieces of bone from the skeleton body began flying in the air. White dust from crushed bones created a wisp of smoke engulfing the Reaper right until Belru's Spartan kicked him, folding him in half and sending him flying back to the village of Velmora. The Grim Reaper hit the farmland with the first impact, then tumbled like a ragdoll until the momentum stopped. Slowly, he got up to his feet, moaning in pain. How long has it been, he thought, for someone to give him a challenge like this? Was there ever a time in battle when death was on the back foot? However, before he could even move, Belru was already behind him. Death widened his eyes, fearing the worst, but nothing happened. The werewolf could have dealt the finishing blow right then and there. He could have killed the Grim Reaper at that moment with the advantage that he had. Yet he just stood there, staring deep into the Grim's eyes. The wound in Belru's stomach began healing. There was a white orb-like light inside the werewolf's stomach that closed the wound caused by the scythe. The Reaper, in absolute awe and maybe fear, now knew why Belru was so strong. That glowing white light closing the wounds, the glowing orb-like shield stopping the fire. Death realized why he didn't find the souls of 5 angels that were murdered. Belru Caesar ate them. The werewolf said, "Something's happened to you. The stories I've heard in hell does not match up to this version of you. Everyone feared you. Realistically, I would have died in this fight. You've given up a portion of your power. Why?" "Sometimes sacrifices are needed. You have your mission and I have mine." The Grim then healed as well, but at a much slower pace. He groaned and walked slowly next to the werewolf. They made their way into Belru's home. The werewolf, reluctant as ever, served him a warm beverage and a meal. Death said, "That was a draw, right? The fight we had was a draw." Belru remained silent. Yes, a draw. We shall leave it as that." There was a moment of awkward silence. Death sipped his tea and took a bite of the fresh bread on the werewolf's table. Then he looked at Belru, sizing him up, and said, "So you devoured their souls, but why? You were guided by them to infiltrate hell and take out the demon army. Why turn on the angels? Why put a bounty on your head?" "I do not care for any bounty, for no being, human or supernatural, is going to stop me. Secondly, if you are still referring to them as angels, then even you were kept in the dark." "Yeah, well, I have been away for a while. There was a task I needed to complete. Fetch X number of souls in more worlds and timelines than I can count. Then I cash in my receipt and forsake this burden of being dead." "Yeah, while you pricks live vicariously in your supernatural veils, it's us ordinary people that have to fix a mess we never cause. We cannot leave when we want to." The entire village began rattling like Velmora was hit by an earthquake. This time Belru looked most frightening as his eyes glowed white. His voice became louder, deeper, and coarse. "Where were you when I called upon you? Where was my way out when I was tortured in hell? Where was my receipt to cash in when those so-called angels left me for dead?" Death held onto his chair and the wooden table, waiting for the tremor to stop. "Listen, Belru, you have to understand." "Zefenriel, Valion,
Chaldiel, Alexandria, Solmiel, Elvaria, Sephira, Talrion, Zepharim, and Jorah. The only angels in the entire kingdom of heaven that conveniently answered prayers of the helpless. No one knew they part of the Velzari.
The Velzari? But that would mean...
Yes, the Velzari. Jorah led this group. With all their disguises, manipulation, dark and treacherous, unspeakable nature, they were fallen angels working for the domain of hell all along.
Chapter 3. Time in Hell. Belru still remembered that day. The animals he looked after in the jungle and the ancient civilization living within that he took care of were ruined before his eyes. Though he showed no emotion, not because he didn't care, but he had a bigger purpose to fulfill. The angel Jorah, a beautiful woman with long black wavy hair, guided him the entire time. She was the angel who could foresee the future thanks to the angel tablet. Jorah convinced Belru the curse cast by the demon would backfire and he would retain his conscience. She told him how becoming a cursed monster would work in the favor of heaven. Belru, blinded by his faith, believed her. Is that not why humans pray? To receive guidance, hope for the unknown path ahead, and strength to fulfill their purpose. What better guidance could one have than an angel standing by their side? However, the day Belru was cursed in his jungle, the day he turned into a monster and entered hell, was the last day that he heard from Jorah. The angel who promised to shelter him through this daunting task of taking out demons in hell had now abandoned him. The werewolf was petrified in that moment. As big and tall and frightening as he may have looked on the outside, he was still that frail scientist within. He would never forget his first steps in hell. He hardly spoke, not because he couldn't, because he was shivering with fear. He saw the raging fires in hell that felt colder than the harshest winter. He heard the torturous screams bursting his eardrums. He witnessed people with no skin left on their bodies, trying to claw their way out of the deepest, darkest burning pits he had ever seen. The demon that cursed him walked alongside the werewolf, speaking in a language that sounded more like deep and muffled gurgling. However, Belru understood every word solely because of the curse. Technically, he was the servant of this monstrous demon in hell. They gave Belru his own dungeon that had only 4 walls and nothing more. The werewolf acted tough and strong in front of his so-called master, but when the dungeon doors closed, he rushed to the corner of the room, trembling with fear. He sat on the cold floor, rocking back and forth, calling out to Jorah in his mind, just the way she taught him. But no one answered. How was he going to take out demonic creatures as frightening as that? How was he supposed to do such a burdened task alone? The werewolf asked for warmth, for food, for something to calm him down, but the demons laughed and shut the dungeon door. For days, Belru would stay alone in that dungeon that made the darker shade of black seem bright. After a while, which felt like eternity, they would throw food under the dungeon door, scraps of dismembered limbs and flesh from those who had been tortured in hell. Belru stayed hungry. The werewolf body began adapting to these harsh conditions. Months passed, which felt like years, and Belru felt numb. He had no fear anymore. The only thing guiding him was his mission, his purpose told to him by the kingdom of heaven. Then he began taking out demons discreetly. He started with the lesser demons, humans that became monsters from either rituals or cannibalism. Lesser demons were expendable and much weaker. Belru noticed how no one looked around or even asked for them. No one noticed they were gone. Or maybe they did notice, but they never cared. With every lesser demon that he killed, Belru felt stronger. Somehow, his body began absorbing their powers, no matter how weak or strong they were. Then he moved on to the higher demons, the war chiefs in hell. These demons were immensely powerful creatures, and Belru was careful in planning his attack. As plentiful as they were, over 50 at least, he had to be smart about it. He had to make sure that no one suspected him. Therefore, after every higher demon that he slaughtered, he would frame them, making it seem like mutiny. The other demon war chiefs respected Belru for this and moved him up the ranks, giving him his own armor and his own dungeon. He gave them the false belief that he was looking out for them all along. Meanwhile, they never knew how much stronger he was getting. They never knew that he had the power of more than 25 higher demon war chiefs absorbed by his body. However, there was one demon war chief that he couldn't kill. Not yet, at least. One demon war chief that never liked Belru and suspected him from day one. Zelzar, they called him. A young demon warrior, 15 foot tall with power that Belru couldn't fathom, was moving up the ranks very quickly. If he took Zelzar out, the werewolf's cover would have been blown, since this war chief was in charge of the demon army. Not much was taking place in Hell after that. Besides the recruitment process, demons were busy, souls were not being tortured as much, and plans were changing at the last minute. Plans that focused on destroying the kingdom of heaven. The higher demons would send Belru to Earth to convince frightening creatures alike to join the domain of Hell. Creatures like vampires, werewolves, ghouls, zombies, anything that instilled fear and had a bloodlust. However, Belru returned to Hell empty-handed. With so many demons sending their own monsters to recruit others for their legion, no one knew the special class werewolf had been devouring those monsters on Earth. They were his source of food after all. Then, rumors began circulating. Talk amongst the foulest of creatures near the pits and dungeons, cages and misty black mountains of a group called the Velzari. Belru listened carefully, gathering as much information as he could. Perhaps if he knew more about the Velzari, he could convey that message to Jorah. Even after all this time, all the pain and suffering in Hell, Belru still remained strong in his faith. He still believed he was a servant of the kingdom of heaven. Though he never learned much, only that the Velzari was a group of fallen angels trying to take over the domain of Hell. They were expelled from heaven, fallen to earth, but refused entry back into their kingdom. But no human could tell the difference. No one could see the darkened wings from the illusions portrayed by the fallen angels. Some suspected a higher demon war chief working with them, but they couldn't be sure. Either way, the domain of Hell knew one of their own was a mole. Belru snuck back into his dungeon. Perhaps the Velzari was preventing Jorah from communicating with him in Hell. Maybe by traveling back to Earth, the angels could reach out to him more easily. But how was he going to go back to Earth again? The higher demons never sent him to recruit others in a very long time. Maybe they suspected Belru was hiding more than he was showing. For now, he needed to open a portal back to his homeland, but there was no way of doing so. Until a creature, most peculiar and unexpected in a dark and frightening place that Hell was, showed up outside his dungeon. Belru heard panting and scratching outside his door. He walked towards it, opened it, only to find 3 hounds outside his dungeon. The largest one was black, the second one brown, and the third a dark gray with a double jaw. They were pups, but even at that age they looked twice the size of large breed dogs. The brown and dark gray hounds, however, looked evil. They were much smaller than the other one, but their souls seemed darker and fouler. Perhaps Belru staying in Hell for so long helped him decipher which souls were good and which souls weren't. The 2 hounds growled and barked at Belru, but when his eyes turned red, they became frightened and scurried away. The large hound pup, however, remained staring at Belru with puppy eyes, tongue out, wagging its tail. While the hound's eyes were glowing red like Belru, there was something so adorable about him. Like the werewolf, it seemed the exterior never matched the innocent soul trapped within. The hound jumped on Belru and took him down, licking his face and rubbing his body onto the werewolf. The werewolf giggled a bit, petting the hound, and said, You're awfully strong for your size, little one. When he looked at the dog tag around its neck, the name said, Monrog. Belru paced around the dungeon, thinking of a way to get back to Earth. The hound sat idly by, moving its eyes back and forth, following the werewolf's movements. Then Belru knelt down, patted Monrog, and asked, You wouldn't know of a way for me to get back to Earth now, would you? Of course you wouldn't. You probably don't even understand. Belru was interrupted. Monrog, the hellhound puppy, drew symbols on the cold dungeon floor using its sharp claws. Strange symbols that were never seen or talked about in any book, human or supernatural. The hound placed its paw onto the symbols and a large portal opened up in Belru's dungeon. A portal that showed a woodland region that the werewolf recognized. His eyes widened as he turned back to the hound and said, You can understand me. Monrog wagged his tail rapidly and barked once for yes. Then the werewolf bent down and hugged the pup with as much care and love as he could muster. You're way too adorable for such a place, you know, he said. The werewolf thanked Monrog, and just before going through the portal, he turned around back at the hound and said, Don't worry, little one, I will come back for you. Once all this is over, I will take you away from this place. The pup barked to acknowledge what Belru said, but there was a moment of sadness that filled its eyes. Once Belru walked through the portal, disappearing into thin air. The hound sat idly by, waiting for him. However, Monrog the hellhound puppy never knew that was the last time that he would see Belru.